Uh, Hello, everybody. Hello, I'm Jim. I'm here to show you how to do various different ideas for basing for your models. That's a bit different to the standard. So I'm just going to swap my camera over if I can remember which weird combination of keys does it. There we go. Right. Okay. Can everybody see that properly? Cool. Awesome. One sec. I'm just consenting to being recorded. There we go. Right, so okay, we've got four different ideas for bases here. We've got the good old reliable green ground and muddy background. We have some cobblestone street. We've got some crazy lava, and we've got like some swamp. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit there, see if you can see it a bit easier. There we are. So yeah, each one of these obviously can be themed according to your model. So if your model is a swamp dwelling goblin or troll or whatever, then the swamp base is ideal for it. A chaotic warrior from some land of magic or whatever might suit the lava one a bit more, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you how to make these four bases plus a bit extras, and then we'll do a bit of question and answer at the end. So the first one, good old reliable green grass on a base. Here's one I made earlier, Blue Peter style. All you got to do is just, as standard, get yourself some super glue and just glue some salt to the top of your base, and then paint it whatever brown you feel like. But it's usually good to look at the color wheel and see what is opposite the majority color of your model. So, for example, if your model is majority green, then brown with a lot of red in it would make it stand out even more, because they're opposite each other and they tend to make each other sort of like more vibrant as a result. So all you got to do with that one is once you painted it brown and waited for it to dry, just get yourself some of this stuff. This is not what it looks like. I nearly got expelled from school for dealing this stuff. It's just sawdust that is spray painted green in a factory, and good old bit of PVA glue, which is actually glued shut in this hot weather. So I'm just going to prise that open. There we go. I'm sure we can edit this out of the YouTube version. So there, just random sort of patches on the base. Kind of helps if you go all the way to the edge, so it doesn't look like grass magically grows only underneath their feet. There we are. And all you've got to do is just sprinkle this lovely stuff over it. Be quite liberal with the stuff, otherwise it's going to look really patchy. And then just tap it off. There we go. Now, it looks a bit white at the moment. That will dry clear, so you will end up with something very similar to this. So that's the first one. That's nice and simple. That's really easy to do if you've got a whole army of guys and you just want to get the bases done and out of the way real quick. It's not particularly themed, so it's a good sort of like catch-all for almost any kind of race or species of good or bad guys that you can imagine. So yeah, so that's your good old grass base done there. So next one, got cobblestones. So this is actually like texture. It's really easy to do, but this is perfect for like city watchmen or or highway robber people. Words escape me. Yeah. So what we do with that is we just got to take a blank base, just using a random square one there, and some of the thinnest plastic card you can find. This stuff is literally as thin as paper. I wouldn't recommend trying to put it in anybody's printer just to test that theory, but there we are. So you just want to get yourself a cutting mat and a sharp blade. And all you want to do is just, you can be fairly uneven with this. It doesn't have to be particularly sort of neat or anything. In fact, the more uneven it is, the more realistic it probably look. And then what we need to do there is just cut yourself a strip out of it that's probably 3/4 of a centimetre wide and a few centimetres long. And then just cut that into squares, oblongs, rectangles, whatever sort of size and shape you feel like you want your cobblestones to be. And there we are. So we'll do the entire base because that'll take forever. But what you need to do is just grab yourself some plastic glue, because this stuff's made of the same stuff as most 28mm models, so it will melt easily with poly cement. And the hot weather has made this gum up as well. Okay, top tip: if you ever got like a needle applicator on any plastic glue or anything, get yourself a broken guitar string, the thinnest one you've got, and the end does flap around a bit, so make sure you don't stab yourself in the eye, like I did last week. And just jam that down the end, and that should clear any blockages. You could also use the, sometimes those Ziploc bags have got like a really sort of firm piece of wire inside the bit where it closes, so you can sometimes rip that out and use it. But that should be working now. And there we are. Yeah, perfect. All right, so just get yourself a bit of that on the base. All you got to do is just glue that down, sort of bring it up to the edge of the base so it's lying flat. And of course, you're going to have some that overhang, and that's fine. That's easy enough to fix. Like, for example, let's just do one there. So say we had like one that actually fitted the gap in the middle there. We'd leave that one on there to dry for a little bit, and then just taking your sharp blade and making sure that you cut away from yourself. You can just trim it off. Okay, don't do what I'm about to do. I'm just going to cut towards myself slightly there. There we go. Perfect. No injuries this time. So that's it. And if you just keep sort of tessellating these on and not dropping the pieces on the floor while you're doing so. There we are. You can see this is beginning to sort of take shape, and you can have this as even or uneven as you want, and you can paint it pretty much any color you like to again sort of be something that would make your army stick out, or your individual model stick out. Actually gray or brown or even like, you know, yellow brick road if you wanted. So when they're all glued in place and they've dried, what we can do is just paint the top of the base. I've painted mine here like this kind of like dusty sandy sort of color. And the finishing touch, if you heavily water down some brown ink or brown paint, and I've watered mine down here with thinning medium, and then this should flow nicely. If you just touch it into the gaps in between the stones, this is a really quick way of doing this, because it relies on its like capillary action and surface tension to sort of just draw it along all these gaps in between the individual tiles. And that, I mean, you could do this green as well if you wanted to sort of like give the impression that there was like algae growing in between them, like on my driveway outside. There we are. So you see, instantly they're all standing out from each other, and when that's dried, less gloss, that's gonna, you know, each individual one's really going to stand out. And you can put a bunch of washes over this. Again, the green wash heavily diluted all over it can make it look like slippery. You can add patches of yellow if you wanted to put some lichen in there. You could even put some of this old reliable green flock. You could get like a toothpick or a cocktail stick with some PVA glue on the end and sort of just nudge it so it's growing only in between the in fact, let's try that. I'm feeling experimental today. While that is still wet, let's see what happens if we put this on. Never done this before, so this could be an absolute train wreck. Just bear with me. We'll do that, tap it off. Hey, see, that's pretty good, isn't it? That looks like it's you know, just like the streets around here where the council's been neglecting them. So that's yeah, so that's a nifty little effect. That I'm quite pleased with that one. So it just goes to show that experimentation is you can really get some interesting results. And I'm going to be hoovering this green stuff up for days, I promise you. Okay. All right. Okay, it's gone everywhere. Never mind. So, right, next up, lava. Now this one's interesting because lava, basically, it's colder towards the edges. Now, I mean, normally when things are glowing, we usually picture them in our heads as being brighter towards the edges. But to get a realistic lava effect, the core of it is always going to be hotter, and the outsides are going to be like this cherry red sort of color. Lava is almost exclusively, in the real world at least, on a black or very, very dark gray background, because volcanic rock tends to sort of melt and set like obsidian and stuff like that. So what I've done here is I've just painted the base a very dark grey, and I've just given it a very light dry brush with an ever so slightly lighter grey on it, just to give it, like, you know, a little stand out a bit, make it stand out from where I painted the edge black. But what I'm going to do is, here's another one I made earlier with beta style. So I'm going to show you how to do this. This is quite fun, but it does rely a bit on randomness. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some magma red, which will be appearing in a future box, but you can use any dark red for this one. It doesn't really matter because it's all going to do the same thing. And if you just apply this from the bottle directly to the base, there we go. And so it's actually on pretty thick there. That's going to take a while to dry. I wouldn't recommend doing this in a cold environment because it'll just take forever. I'm just going to get my trusty palette out. There we are. I just use scraps of old plastic for my palettes, by the way, if anyone was wondering. But you could use a plate. Just don't use your mother's collection of fine china because she will never forgive you. All right, so what we want to do then is just take a dark orange. So in this case, Reaper's lava orange. Just give it a good shake, make sure it's separated out. I'll just get a bit of this on the palette. Now, rather than sort of painting this on sort of in a, I don't know, like a careful sort of manner, what we're really going to do is we want to load your brush up with it and sort of dab it into the middle. And where the two paints are wet, they're kind of blending, but they're also kind of staying separate because we're not actually mixing them. We're sort of more just sort of guiding it. And if we don't apply too much pressure, they're not going to mix together, but it's got that kind of random slurpy look that lava has. And I looked at a fair few lava videos while I was experimenting with this one, and my YouTube search history must look very weird to an outsider. So there we go. So we've got that down the middle there. And again, while it's all still wet, we'll just take the next color up. It should be this one, Explosion Orange. And so this one's a bit of a lighter orange here. As you can see there on the palette, there's quite a contrast between the two. If we just, again, just dab it, but only down the middle, and this gives the effect of the lava cooling towards the edges as it sort of like approaches the rocks to either side. And you really do have to use quite a bit of this to get the effect. And then finally, just get quite a bright yellow, in this case, candlelight yellow. And we just repeat this for the final step. Oh, I don't think I've shook that up enough because that's actually gone quite medium-y there. That's where basically the stuff that comes out that's a bit weak and watery is actually like the binding medium that the pigment's in. It's basically the same stuff as you can buy separately, which is why when you're watering down stuff with medium, like we explored in the washes masterclass, it doesn't actually sort of like change the property of the paint at all. It just dilutes the color. If we just get a large amount of that there and just dab that down the center, and you see this is where like the real bright core of the lava is sort of coming out. But we don't want it to look too much like a straight line. It's it's a bit weird, so we will sort of just gently blend those together slightly there. It's a bit sort of like random, this one. You've got to look for happy accidents and sort of just go with the flow. But there we are. So you see we've got this kind of like sort of random, very liquidy sort of look to it. You've got bits where the colors are swirling into each other and bits where they're fairly solid, and that's just how real lava tends to behave. It sort of slurps over itself and then solidifies, and other bits kind of like fall over it. It doesn't behave like water at all, so we shouldn't paint it as such. But when that dries, I mean, you could always give it a coat of gloss varnish if you wanted to, just to make it stand out a bit more from the grey background. But when that dries, that's gonna look pretty cool, to be honest. Sorry, I was off camera there. Pretty cool. Oh yeah. And then the exact opposite of lava, I'm going to go cold with this one. So we're going to try snow. So this is well, more specifically slush, because snow is easy to do. You can buy snow that's basically made of crushed glass, or like some kind of white powder. But basically you used to apply those with PVA glue. But slush is a lot more, difficult to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trusty cup of salt, which is going a bit grim on top there. So I'm just going to mix it. There we are. All right. So first thing you want to do with this, you want to, well, have a look at what slush looks like. Mostly, it has a very sort of gelatinous look to it. So what we'll do is we're gonna just need an old brush for this, because I don't trust gloss varnish with my nice brushes. But just take an old one there, and any brand of gloss varnish will do, but Reaper's is obviously the best, so we'll use that. So yeah, just pop a bit of that, and you want to just then grab a bit of salt on your brush there and just start mixing it in until you get something that you're quite happy with the consistency of. It's going to end up being like kind of crunchy and bitty. Just dilute with more gloss varnish until you've got something that's workable. It's not too dry and it's not too liquid. And then just sort of just spread this on your base. Now, slush, obviously, it follows the laws of gravity. So unlike snow, which, falls and then gathers in weird patterns, slush is almost always flat. So if you can work this salt mixture into flat areas, it's going to look a lot more realistic. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you can put as little or as much on as you like. But if you, there we go. So we've got some fairly flat sludge there. Now, another coat of gloss varnish when that is set is going to really hammer home the sloshy look. But there's a note that you can try, and that is broken ice. Now, I don't know if this is going to take too long or not, but what you want to do is, typical, I just threw them all away when I needed them. Right, bear with me one moment. I am 100% prepared for this, I promise. Right, so any old plastic bag will do. Ideally clear. Just cut yourself a flat section of it. So there we are. Now this can go either way because it's quite a touch and go whether it works or not. It depends on the brand of super glue you've got. I'm using this super glue here. This is quite slow drying stuff. which is actually beneficial for this, not so much when you're trying to glue models together. But if you just stick that on there, and we'll just wait for that to set for a few moments. Just be very careful that you don't like put your elbow in this or whatever when it's setting. But ultimately, we should have something that will crack when it's split, plastic and all, or alternatively you can cut it. But we'll just wait. We'll come back to that later. We'll move on to the next one while we're waiting for that to set, and I'll try not to lean on it or anything so it sticks to me. So yeah, the last one is this funky thing here. This is a swamp base, and this is really easy to do. So what we're going to do there is just take a blank empty base, and these are amazing. These are nail art beads. They are acrylic. You can get them off eBay or Amazon. They are really, really cheap, and I find them useful for just about everything. The small ones make great rivets for tanks. The large ones make great eyes if you're making like chaos monsters or whatever like that. But because they come in such a variety of sizes, it's great to just, you know, grab a medium one and an extra large one, and like I say, they only cost a couple of quid for like 700 or 800 of the things, so you know, really good value for money. Again, if we take the base and just stick the super glue, just 3 where we want them to go, 3 small patches, and then take our trusty scalpel again. You just want to kind of be very careful that you don't slip while doing this, but just pick it up just by pressing the end of the scalpel into it, put it down there, waiting for the super glue to catch on. Again, this is very slow drying super glue, so it's not the best for this job, but it was like £2.50 for like 100 tubes. So there we go. So good variety. You can cluster these if you want. I mean, I wouldn't recommend you search for pictures of swamps and lava and all that, because whatever FBI agent is looking at your search history is going to be very, very confused indeed. But yeah, there we go. So we've glued those 3 on there, and this, we're just going to have to wait a few moments for that super glue to dry. And ruin a brush. It's up to you. I've got trillions of brushes, so I'm going to go ahead and ruin one for you guys. So let me do just dab off as much of the excess super glue as possible. And we need a nice swampy green color first. Now with this, I'm going to go with Reaper's olive green. This is the perfect color for this job. It's really natural looking. It doesn't have any kind of particularly sort of magical look to it. It honestly just looks like you haven't cleaned your bathroom in quite some time, and mold has started growing in places. Not speaking from experience, obviously. So, all right, what you want to do is just spread this evenly around the base. Again, pretty thick. This is about as thick as the lava was on the last one, because we really need this, the properties of the paint to sort of, you know, this liquid surface tension and stuff like that is what's going to help us here. So, you know, the more depth to this paint, the better. What you do is take yourself a brown ink. I am using Winsor & Newton's brown calligraphy, sepia calligraphy ink. This stuff is fantastic. You can get it from the range. It's about £2.50. It's not the same as any of the washes that are commonly sold as part of many miniature companies' paint lines. This is definitely you know, like a completely different. This is for artists and calligraphers and stuff. But it's kind of, it's water soluble, but it's got like, you ever sort of tried cleaning a frying pan out and you always get that separation of the oil and the water? This is exactly the same what happens here with the paint and the ink. So if we just gently dab it on. Now the ink is heavier than the paint, so it's going to sink, but it's still sat underneath the surface, and we need to bring it out in a moment. So this is where the surface tension really helps us here, because we've got like semi-random sort of shapes beginning to appear. And then if you just break that surface tension, dab in over the top. This can be quite messy, but you're already getting these random swirls and patterns in it. Don't know if the light's reflecting on it weird there. And then if you stop before you go too far, then you end up with these crazy sort of like tide marks in the top, and they look really good. Again, very messy, so it's best not to do this on the kitchen table. I'm just going to wipe this away, or that's going to be in every Dragon Painter video from now on. That's going to need some methylated spirit on it later. We'll be good. So yeah, so that dries, which takes a while, although not in this crazy heat wave we've had recently. You could always put it in direct sunlight to speed it up, but you tend, I mean, this one here, I dabbed a bit more, so there's a bit more brown showing. This one here's got a bit more green, but it really does look like a swamp, and sludge is sort of like bubbling up out of it, swamp gas or whatever. So yeah, so it's really simple. It's very nicely themed, especially you've got like trolls or ogres or such nasty creatures, or even wood elves who you know, don't mind hanging around in swamps, I guess. So yeah, let's go back to the super glue experiment. Now, this is very slow drying super glue, and I've stuck my fingers together. But yeah, basically when that completely dries, which might take a while, you can snap it, or you can cut it into like diagonal, triangular sort of shapes, and then stick it down with more super glue, and it ends up looking like somebody stepped on the top of a frozen puddle. I'm sorry this is taking forever to dry. The problem is that super glue can't dry in the presence of air, which is why you always have a bit of air in the top of the bottle. So actually, if we bend that over and cut off its air supply, that might do the trick. If not, we shall just forever have to wonder. There we go. All right, so that should, oh, it's beginning to work already. And I'm stuck to it. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so you can cut that with scissors or a knife, and then glue it down, you know, preferably in a sort of circular pattern, so it looks like there's like an impact spreading out from a central sort of point. But it's just another sort of technique you can use. You can then cover that with more sludge to look like it's sort of fallen on top of the you know, snow's fallen on top of the ice, and then it's kind of half frozen and then not. And you know, pictures on Google, always your best friend with this sort of thing. Looking at real life references always helps. So yeah, let's just turn back to my pretty face again. Oh, so that's 5 interesting and different base ideas there, a different selection of colors to suit your color scheme of whatever army or warband or individual model you're working on at the time. So yeah, any questions? Should we stop the recording there and then